everybody in UK Crime Book Land. I'm here with Becca Day to talk about her latest novel. She's got the first one, but I believe you already got your second one just signed in this week as well, haven't you?
Yep, I do indeed. So this one is The Girl Beyond the Gate, which is my debut novel. And then my second book is coming out in November. So I've sent that across to my agent now.
That must be exciting. Can we open by just telling the audience about what the plot is?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, by the way, Alex.
No problem at all.
Lovely to see you again. So The Girl Beyond the Gate is about a woman called Jodie who moves to a gated community called Kensington Grove. And she does that because she's got lots of sort of secrets and bad stuff that's happened in her past, and she wants a fresh start. So she moves to this gated community where she knows she's not going to get anyone sort of coming and knocking at her door. And she befriends the little girl next door, Lacey, and starts to worry that her mother, Nora, might not have the best of intentions and starts investigating her.
The book has got a split narrative between two people. Was that always in the plan, or was it developed later?
No, it was very much developed later. Originally, it was just from Jodie's point of view when I first started drafting it. And then I got maybe about 40% through and decided that I wanted to have Nora's point of view as well, just because they're two very, very different women and they have two very different sides to the story. So I wanted the feel of like you're not sure which point of view to believe. And I thought that would work quite well. So I ended up adding Nora's point of view later on in the drafting process.
Given how important the two narratives are, and the fact that you changed it so late on, how much of a challenge was it to try and fit and do all that in?
Yeah, it involved going right back to the beginning, which was not the most fun time. But yeah, it just meant that I had to sort of start again. But I was in a really good place where I'd already written nearly half the book, so I knew where the story was going. It was just making sure that I had all the threads of the two different narratives that were equally strong all the way through.
Having interviewed other authors yourself, what was it like having your own event as like on launch day, and also you did a reading party the week later?
It's so bizarre. It's really, really strange being on the other end of it because I've spent so long interviewing other authors. And to finally be the author who's being interviewed is very, very strange, but it's great. It's something that I've been working towards for years. So to actually be here and be doing interviews like this it's so much fun, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. When me and you met through William Shaw's reading party, how did you find out about that, and what made you decide to try and get involved in that situation? The
first reading party I ever went to was Will Dean's for The Last Thing to Burn. I was a massive Will Dean fan anyway. So when I saw that there was an opportunity to hop on a Zoom call with him and ask a few questions and get a signed book, I was like, yes, absolutely, I'm going to do that. Didn't actually realise that it involved me reading live until I got my excerpt, and then I realised what it actually was. But I absolutely loved it. I thought it was such a good idea, such a fantastic concept that William Shaw came up with. And I realised he was doing it all on his own. So I just popped him an email and said, do you need a hand? And he said yes. And that's kind of how I ended up getting involved in the sort of admin side and the interviewing all the authors and hosting. So yeah, it's been a great journey. I've met so many lovely people, including yourself.
When deciding on who to choose, because I know sometimes you've chosen the author instead of William, how have you met the authors? Because I do find that a challenge to get all the interviews for me, and I'm just interested in a different angle, because obviously you might have found them in another way.
Yeah, it's just the normal way actually. It's just sort of contacting either on Twitter or contacting PRs directly. But I think the advantage with the reading parties is because it's quite a unique event. I think publicists are quite interested to see
Yeah,
what it will do for authors.
yeah, it is very, very unique. That that is actually one of the questions I was just about to ask you. How do you balance writing with being a full-time mom?
Um, it, I think she's all good. It's all good. She's with my husband at the moment. Balance is interesting. It's an interesting one. But I'm very lucky that my agent and my team at the publishing house are so supportive of the fact that I've got a newborn. So yeah, they've said, if you need to sort of push deadlines a little bit, then that's fine. Just keep us updated. And it's just been a really lovely working relationship. And I think that's so important when you are a mum trying to sort of balance the two things.
Yeah, because family relationships are important to the plot for your book. Um, it's such a unusual thing as with the gated community. What would you say you've learned through the first and second? Because obviously you would have learned something when writing the second one.
Yeah. So I think with The Girl Beyond the Gate, it took me a while to really establish what style I liked in terms of thrillers. So I'd never, before writing it, I'd never written in multi points of view. I'd never done sort of flashbacks. I'd never done there's a WhatsApp message stream that goes all through the book, and I'd never tried anything like that. So it was a little bit of experimentation, really, trying to figure out what I enjoyed writing into my books. And a lot of those things that I figured out I really enjoy have transferred over to book two. Instead of a WhatsApp message, there's tweets, for example, and there's a flashback and things like that, and it's multi POV. So it's finding those things that sort of you enjoy and then making a kind of style for yourself. I guess that's
Yeah,
hopefully going to continue developing.
the WhatsApp messages are really short chapters in the book. I mean, it comes across really really well on audio because there's a noise to indicate that you're just about to go into a WhatsApp thing. But how have you done that on the page? Because it must be harder.
It's just different formatting. So yeah, with the audiobook, I was really impressed with how they did that because I didn't know how they were going to do that. And they've got the little ding which tells you it's a WhatsApp message. But the on the page it's just different formatting, so it's kind of set out to look like WhatsApp messages, and you've got like that @ symbol on there. So yeah, it's very clever how they do it.
Yeah, because when you put in the short conversation between all the women in there, it must be difficult to decide what to include when, because that's like a little reveal situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I really wanted to include the WhatsApp group because it's something that I think is quite typical of a group of women. Like I've got one for my daughter's school. It's a group of women who just chat absolute nonsense on WhatsApp. So I really wanted to include that just to bring up that kind of feel of like a bitchy community kind of thing, and have lots of gossip going on and lots of talking about people behind each other's backs, but trying to make sure that it wasn't just info dumping, that it was actually realistic conversations that dropped in these little nuggets throughout. Was it was quite tricky.
Yeah, with such a as you say community like with a little bit of backstabbing and stuff. Um, who are your favourite characters in there? Because there's quite a few for such a small little community. You've got
Yeah.
your little.
Yeah, it's a decent cast of characters. I don't think any of them are particularly lovely characters, to be honest. I think they've all got their secrets, and they've all got things that are not necessarily the nicest things to have. But my favourite character to write is Heidi, because Heidi is this lady who she's got the perfect hair and she's got the pearls, and she comes across as very perfect Instagram filtered, but then she's got quite a lot of depth that you find out throughout the story, and quite a lot of layers, and exploring her character was actually really fun. And I really wanted to give her a little bit of a redemption arc by the end of the story. So yeah, she was my favourite character to write.
When deciding what to do with like Nora's character, what made you focus on Lacey with her disability? Because it's not exactly a normal disability that people would assume, and must have taken a lot of research to get right.
Yeah, it did. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted Lacey to have, because there were lots of different options, and I ended up settling on cystic fibrosis just because when I was doing my research, it had quite a lot of symptoms that worked with the story. So yeah, it involved a lot of research because I really wanted to make sure that I kept things accurate as possible, and that I didn't end up accidentally insulting anyone who had it or who knew someone who had it. So it was probably the bit that took the longest of the whole writing of the book, was researching it and making sure that I was sticking to facts.
I think when you were talking about it on your launch, you said that you focused your dialogue with Lacey on one of your relatives was you used your relative to help you work out the right dialogue for that?
Yeah. So I really struggle to write kids just because I'll go into some description that I think sounds really good, or I'll go into making sure the prose is really nice to listen to, and then I'm like, actually that's not how children speak. So I tried listening to my niece a lot and copying how she speaks, but because she's quite mature for her age, it ended up Lacey started off sounding more like a teenager, and she's 12, so she needed to sort of sound a little bit younger. So it ended up Lacey went through quite a lot of editing. Once I got the book deal, I worked with my editor quite a lot to sort of make her sound younger. So that was definitely it was a work in progress.
I must admit, with my own writing, and the idea of writing children is something that I haven't had the nerve to do yet. When you were coming up with the idea, why was it psychological thrillers that made you think, oh, this is the genre I'm going to have a go at? Because it's quite a wide genre pool.
Yeah, it is. To be honest, I originally started writing fantasy sci-fi when I first decided I wanted to be an author. So I wrote a sci-fi novel that is in a drawer and will never be seen. And then it was only once I'd finished that and started sort of editing it and thinking there's something wrong here, I realised it's just not what I read. I read psychological thrillers, and so I feel like I should be writing psychological thrillers too, because it's the main thing that I enjoy. So I thought I'd give it a go, trying to write a psychological thriller and see how that turns out. And it worked much better than me writing sci-fi. I'm much better at writing psychological thrillers than sci-fi.
It's such a hard side of the genre to go into, because there's a lot of people writing it. What would you say is the kind of tips that you give someone to do it and how to go?
I'd say if you're going into psychological thrillers, firstly, make friends in the community, because in general the crime writing community and the book community is so friendly. So definitely make friends there. But I would say in terms of actually writing a psychological thriller, I think planning is really important. Even if you're not a plotter, even if you like to sort of discovery write or pants, whatever you call it, I think you still need to have a bit of a plan in place, because you've got all the twists that you need to include. You've got the if there's a murder, you need to know why that person was killed, and you need to know what the person's motive was and everything like that. So I think quite a lot of planning does go into these kind of books. So yeah, that's what I'd say, is spend some time really making the idea concrete in your head.
You said earlier in the interview that you're a Will Dean fan, and there's a journalist in your book. Would you say that journalism is a character that you'd like to write and read, and why is that?
Yeah, the reason I made her a journalist is because of the kind of person she is, I knew I wanted her to kind of start investigating her neighbour, and I was originally thinking maybe she's a police officer, but then it just didn't work for her to be part of the law. So I was thinking, what other career could she have that would sort of lend itself to that I want to investigate people sort of personality? And journalist just came to me because I was thinking, if you're a journalist, especially if you're a human interest journalist, which Jodie is, then you've got that natural thing of, I want to find out more about these people. So it worked really well for her character.
When thinking about Jodie's past and when to write the reveal, it must have been awkward to try and lace the clues in there, and I've never worked out how people do it in a long-term novel, because at the minute I'm known from shorts.
Yeah, it's it goes back to what I said about planning. I think is just if you've got something that you want to reveal at, like I knew that Jodie's past, I wanted to reveal it quite late. So there's a concept called Chekhov's gun, where you say anything that is mentioned has to sort of pay off eventually. So if you talk about something in someone's past, then you have to sort of explain it further on. So I knew that I wanted to reveal her background right at the end, so I had to then pepper things through for the rest of the novel. And some of it is planning and some of it is editing as well, like going back afterwards once you've written the first draft and sort of dropping in those little clues.
You've had a mentor with the book. Would you say that kind of experience gave you a different idea about how it would work? Because I write with people as well, but not many people can do that. It's a hard skill.
Yeah, the mentorship was amazing. It was Lauren North, who's another psychological thriller author, and she was so helpful. She jumped on so many Zoom calls with me when I was stuck and wasn't sure how to fix a plot hole, and she just jumped on a call with me and she would help me talk it out, and it was just so helpful. She was actually the one who initially suggested putting Nora's point of view in. Which was something, like I say, I'd never done it before, so it hadn't even occurred to me to do that. So yeah, she did have quite a lot of input into the book, which I'm so grateful for, because it really felt like a bit of a collaborative thing to produce. But yeah, it was amazing.
When working on those Zoom calls, how did you take the notes? Because I'm doing that with my book at the moment, and I find that talking with someone is okay, but then you forget things after the conversation.
Yeah, well, we did two versions of the mentorship. So I sent her the manuscript and she left notes. So that was really helpful, because obviously I had it there that I could look at the notes she'd left me. And then when we jumped on Zoom calls, it was usually to discuss a specific thing. So if I was stuck with a specific part, then I would chat to her about it. And sometimes I would just voice record it so that I could sort of listen back to it. But yeah, it was very good.
I think I might have to do the voice recording thing myself. Yeah. When you started to try and promote this book, because you're obviously editing your second book, what would you say is the challenge between balancing which one to focus on? Because I've got the same problem at the moment, and I'm a bit kind of, oh my God,
yeah,
what am I in for? Yeah,
it's intense, isn't it? Like it's one of those things. When you're writing your first book, you can take as long as you want with it, really, because you haven't got anyone waiting for it. But when you know you've got people waiting for edits and waiting for you to produce certain amounts of work, and then you're trying to balance it with promotion, it's really hard. I think I don't know. I don't really know the answer to it, but I think making sure that I put aside specific days where I'm just focusing on book 2 or even book 3. I'm plotting book 3 at the moment. So yeah, saying today's a day for book 2. And I'm not going to think about book one. I'm just going to focus on book two, and then just
Yeah.
try to separate it out that way. I think that's the only way that I can do it.
Now, I when I do interviews, can't read notes. How do you do it? Because obviously you might be able to read notes off people. Have you got set questions you want to ask somebody?
Yeah, I do usually try to sort of prepare questions, just so that I'm not sort of floundering, I guess. But I tend to only read out the first couple of questions that I've planned, and then the conversation just sort of flows from there, and I end up asking different things that come to my head as we're chatting. So it's a little bit of a fluid interview style.
Now, what's the most fun question that you've noted down but you've not asked someone yet that you want to?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess I would love to. I would love to know about people's failures. So, like before they became a successful author, because I've got the story that failed, like the sci-fi story that I keep in a drawer and that I will never publish. I'm always interested to know if other authors have books like that where they've written it and decided actually this isn't good enough. Just to know that you're not alone when you when you write a not very good novel.
Well, when it comes to sci-fi, they're a completely different kind of subgenre of writing. But you must like science. So, have you focused on that when researching? And does science affect the crime writing too?
Yeah, I do. I do really enjoy it. I love reading sci-fi, not quite as much as psychological thrillers. I read a lot more of those. But yeah, science in general and sort of I enjoy sort of researching things like Lacey's medical condition. Like that was quite interesting to me, finding out all about cystic fibrosis. And with book two, one of the characters suffers from disinhibition. So like brain damage disinhibition. So
Yeah.
learning all about that has been really, really interesting. And I've been talking to people who have suffered with it. I've been watching videos of people who have suffered with it, and it's just really interesting getting to know all of these things that I really don't know much about, so that I can sort of realistically write it into a book. So yeah, the research part, it's one of my favourite parts of writing a book, actually.
Is that what you look for when you read books of pleasure as well? Something unique in them?
Yeah, I always like to. I feel like there's quite a lot of, especially in psychological thrillers, there's quite a lot of stories which are very similar to each other. So I always enjoy it when a book has something like that that just makes it stand out a little bit.
When you were working with Laura, you must have read her book. What would you say that you found in her book that you would say that she does well?
Yeah, I mean, Lauren is a fantastic author. The book that I read while I was working with her was the Perfect Betrayal, which I think I've got. Yeah, I've got it here. This is the one that I read while I was working with her, and I can't actually say what my favourite thing about that was because it's the twist, but it's very clever. The way she writes the story, if you read it, really, once you finish it, look back on the book and think about everything you've read, and it's very, very clever.
It's always the hardest thing I find as well, when writing reviews up, and you want to talk about the thing that makes you interested in the book, but you can't.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because you must have to do the same when because you've got your own YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's really hard because especially in our genre, there always are twists, and hopefully, if you've done them well, that will be your favourite part of the story, and it will be the bit that you want to talk about. So it is really difficult, but yeah, I suppose just sort of saying it's got a really good twist is a good way to do it, or just talking about the other areas of the story, the other things that make it unique.
Into relationships, especially like the boyfriend on the scene is in your book, but what would you say is the would you say that that's important to what you like to read, or is it just in that particular book? Or yeah, I'm just trying to think of a way of framing it.
Yeah, I don't really mind either way, to be honest. It depends whether it serves the story. For this book, I felt like there needed to be that relationship, because it sort of led on to other things. And in book two, there's a relationship that's actually really, really important to the plot. So I think it's just if it serves the story, it's not a deal breaker for me if there's no relationships in a book. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me.
When reading things like on reading party, been the most awkward thing you've had to read out and you might have been embarrassed about?
We did a reading party recently. I didn't actually have to read it, but it was quite funny listening to it. We did a party recently with Sarah Vaughan, doing Reputation,
Yeah.
and there's tweets in it where there's some really, really terrible language, and I assigned that part to a lady who I didn't know who she was, and it was only when she came up on screen I realised who it was, and it was Sarah Bonner's mum. And she had to read these awful lines, and I just sat there and cringed. I was like, I'm so sorry that I made you read those lines, but someone had to read them.
What would you say is the most hard thing about writing dialogue? Because I've noticed when doing reading parties how difficult the dialogue can sometimes be.
Yeah, dialogue is tricky. I think the thing that helps me is I used to do acting. So I used to write a lot of scripts, and I think that helps because I'm quite used to writing what's hopefully quite realistic dialogue. But it is tricky because you want to get across, you want it to be realistic, but you also don't want it to sort of drag. So in realistic conversation, a lot of people will say like, "Hi, how are you? How's the weather?" Things like that, and that's not entertaining conversation to read in a book. So yeah, trying to find the balance there is definitely tricky.
When doing reading parties, often the prologue that authors get to their audience to read out. What is it that is important to you about a prologue?
So I've read prologues before that I've been quite bored by because they're basically just lots and lots and lots of backstory, and that never really grabs me. And I think with a prologue, it does have to grab you because otherwise people just skip past it and go to chapter one. So for a prologue, I mean, what I tend to do, what I've done it with this book and with book two, is I've started with a quite high action scene that's right near the end of the book, and then I've done a flashback for chapter one onwards.
Yeah.
And that for me works quite well because it's saying this is what you can expect at the end of the book, but first we're going to talk you through everything that led up to that moment. And I quite enjoy that format. I do like prologues that don't do that as well, but I think as long as they've got some kind of action going on and it really grabs you, I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, in the girl, there's a lot. There's a over 100 days build up. Must have been a challenge to decide what to include in that build up.
Yeah, it was weird. The timeline changed so many times. Like, I ended up having to do a big spreadsheet in Excel, and I think 3 different editors ended up going in and looking at it and being like, hang on, this kind of happened on this day because this happened on this day, and it just ended up getting very, very messy. But yeah, originally I think I was going to do it over a year. And then when I actually figured out like this is going to happen around Halloween, this is going to happen a couple of months before that, it just ended up being 108 days. It wasn't something that I planned. It's just how it ended up happening based on the events I planned.
Yeah, I do like the idea of the Halloween party in the middle of the box for the tension. I mean, what events in the year do you like with your family and things that you might use in the book later?
Yeah, I was actually thinking I'd quite like to do a book at some point that's set around Christmas, because I love Christmas, and I just thought it would be quite interesting to try and promote a book that's happening. It's set at Christmas, like you can then promote it leading up to Christmas. I thought that would be quite fun. But trying to figure out how to do a psychological thriller that's set at Christmas is kind of like, it's very juxtaposition. So I don't know, it might happen.
Well, I must admit, I do like the idea of that, the style of the Girl Beyond the Gate at Christmas, because you've got all the weather as well and the complications that might bring in. And I'm just thinking that what do you think that Christmas would allow you to do with your new book that you haven't done in this one?
Well, I would actually really like to do a proper locked room thriller at some point. So obviously the Girl Beyond the Gates kind of got a little bit of that because you're in this enclosed community. But I would really like to do the kind of book where, you know, someone's stuck in a building and they can't get out because of the weather or whatever. So that's definitely something I'd like to do at some point.
When looking at larger universes that aren't enclosed communities like big cities, where would you set a big city plot?
I would actually really love to do a book in South Africa, in the city, because I used to go there a lot when I was a kid, and I'd quite like to sort of revisit that in a book. So maybe something in like Cape Town or something like that. That would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like lots of land around with not a lot of people, and then you got like something that happens, a bit like Jane Harper and that kind of idea.
Yeah.
When reading other people though, what genre have you read besides sci-fi or another genre that you might like to look into?
Well, fantasy is another one that I really love. So I've got a good friend, Ali Ernest, who is currently publishing her fantasy novel, and it was just brilliant. I got to read it early and it was fantastic. I loved it so much. So yeah, fantasy is another love of mine. I do tend to mostly read psychological thrillers now just because I get sent so many, but I do like to sort of disappear into another world every now and again.
Yeah, psychological thrillers are a lot shorter than sci-fi or fantasy, so you must find it difficult time to fit those in, because it takes me twice as long to read a fantasy novel as it does a crime novel.
Yeah, that's why I read mostly psychological thrillers, because I can get through more of them. But yeah, I do like to, when I can, set aside time for a fantasy, usually an audiobook, because then I can listen to it. I tend to get through audiobooks a lot quicker than reading books.
When using audiobooks, do you do that in the car or in bed? Where do you like to use an audiobook? Because
I use them any chance I can. When I'm driving, that's a really good time, but also on the school run. So like once I've dropped my daughter off at school, I've then got to walk home. So I'll listen to it on the walk home. I've got a dog, so I walk the dog and I'll listen to audiobooks. So whenever I can, really, I love them.
Yeah. When the audiobook came out for you, the Girl Beyond the Gate, what was the favourite bit? Because there's lots of narrators and all sorts of different things.
My favourite bit was listening to Lacey's chapter. There's one chapter from Lacey's point of view right at the end, and that's because it was narrated by Imogen Wild, who I've been a huge fan of for years. So because I've listened to her narrate audiobooks before, to hear her read my book was just absolutely mind-blowing. It was so bizarre hearing her read it. So yeah, that was my favourite bit to listen to.
When we spoke to each other on your launch day, we spoke about TV adaptations of the book. I know that it's probably early, but yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I would absolutely love to happen, obviously, but it's very early days. So, but yeah, apparently Netflix are asking for more and more books to be turned into TV shows. Apparently, they're asking for more than they've ever asked for. So, fingers crossed. You never know.
You never know, indeed. If anyone's wondering why I asked the question, it's because T.M. Lagan was on your launch, and you had him on reading party just before yours. He's now written, I believe it's 5 novels. Which one of his is your favourite?
Oh, I think. Oh, that's a tough one. I think it will either be the one he's just written, which is The Curfew, or Trust Me. I think Trust Me is my favourite. It was just brilliant. Like from the first chapter, it grips you.
I must admit, The Holiday, the one that was made into a drama for Channel 5, was the one I've enjoyed so far.
Yeah, it is a really good one. I've got all of his books, so I'm a big fan. I was very starstruck to have him on my launch.
Yeah, I met him at Waterson's in Nottingham. Where, if you've gone to a live event, where have you gone to? And was it local to you, or did you go far?
I haven't been to any live events because I started all of this, like getting involved in the community when, like during COVID. I've not really had any opportunity. The only live thing I've been to, I went to David Fennell's book launch for The Art of Death, and I went to S.V. Leonard's launch for The Influencers. But apart from those two, I haven't been to any like proper big events. I'm hoping to maybe do Harrogate this year, but it's
Yeah.
difficult with the baby, so we'll see.
Oh, I love Harrogate. I mean, I was speaking to, I think it was, trying to think. It's one of the New Blood authors, and she'd only got, I think a baby was 3 days old.
Oh my goodness.
She came down to Harrogate and did the New Blood panel 3 days after, or a week after giving birth.
Oh, wow. That is impressive.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest challenge you've had to do whilst writing?
So both times I've written, well, all 3 times if you include the sci-fi novel, all 3 times that I've written a novel, I've hit a wall at about 50% when I get to about halfway through. And I just can't seem to break past it. I get completely stuck. I get completely caught up in my own head. And I end up just sort of not writing for like 2 months. And I always feel awful during that time because that's when I start doubting if I can actually be an author and if I've got it in me to get it through to the ending of the story. And I always do, I always break through it. But yeah, it keeps on happening. Every single time I write a novel, I hit this brick wall, and I'm not quite sure yet how to stop that from happening.
Oh, I'll tell you what, when you do, please let me know.
I know there must be some kind of secret formula somewhere. So
Yeah.
I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Yeah, the wall is probably the hardest thing for me. I write short stories instead. Are there any short story writers that you like to read?
I am not sure about short story writers actually. I've written a few myself for like entering into competitions and stuff, but I would absolutely love to read some more. So if you have any suggestions for good short story writers, definitely let me know because that's something I want to start getting into reading more.
Well, I think I'm going to have to look into it because, let's just say short stories are involved in 2 out of the 3 books that I've been writing. So I'm getting quite used to doing it now, but it's still hard.
Yeah.
What's coming up for you in the near future? Is there any kind of reading party people that you've got lined up?
Yeah, so next week we've got Will Dean, which I'm obviously very excited about, doing Firstborn. So that's very exciting. We've got William Shaw, who's publishing under GW Shaw, and that is for Dead Rich. That's coming up. And then we've got Callie Taylor for The Guilty Couple, which I'm so excited about because it's a fantastic book. If you've read it, it's absolutely brilliant. So some really good reading party events coming up. Definitely check them out.
what do you do when you get an early version? Because when I get them through audiobooks, it's really kind of complicated to structure the reading what on when their book is going to come out.
Yeah, I kind of have to bump them up depending on, like, at the moment I'm desperately trying to finish the book that I'm currently reading so that I can quickly read Firstborn, because I only received the proof last week, I think. And obviously he's coming on next week, so I need to have read it by then. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of whoever I've got coming on, I need to bump them up to the top of the pile.
Do you do like any kind of speed reading? Have you got used to doing that, or do you avoid the speed reading if you can?
I think it kind of depends on the book. With The Last Thing to Burn, I sped read that. I didn't even need to. I wasn't doing it for an interview or anything. I just read it really, really quickly because I was so engrossed in it. And I think with psychological thrillers, quite often they are very pacey, so you can read them quite quickly. But yeah, it kind of depends on the book. If it's a slow burn, then sometimes I struggle to read it quickly.
If there's something that you really want to do that haven't done yet, what would you do?
Something writing related, or just anything?
Writing related or anything, like if you wanted to like jump off something, or yeah.
I definitely don't want to jump off of anything. So I would love to do a walking safari. So like I say, I went to South Africa a lot when I was a kid, and I did a lot of jeep safaris. But I would love to do a walking safari where you get to just walk through the wilderness. That's something that I've always really wanted to do. And then writing related, I guess, just go to a festival.
Yeah, I mean, I love festivals, and I would say if you do manage to get to Harrogate, don't miss out Betty's.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. It's got to be a tip, because that's normally my first thing I do on a Thursday. Yeah.
Nice. All right, I will make sure to remember that.
Yeah. Of all the panels at Harrogate, if you do manage to go this year, is there anybody you're looking forward to?
I don't actually know who's on yet. I haven't looked at it properly. It's terrible, isn't it? I call myself an author.
Well, there's that many people that turn up at Harrogate. Sometimes it's difficult to know who's going to be there.
Yeah, I think the main thing I would be looking forward to is just meeting other authors. Like, I know a lot of the time it's just sort of mingling with other authors, and I've met so many people virtually online. I'm desperate to meet people in real life.
Oh, I love doing that. I mean, when you've got all your friends and things, like anecdotes and stuff, what anecdote have you done that you might want to use into a book that people have said, oh, please include that one? I get that all the time now.
Yeah, I think the biggest tip that I got from another author was from William Shaw. He was saying about how he comes up with his character names, and he said that he looks at the Facebook friend requests that he's got from people that he doesn't know, and he uses those as names for his characters. And I thought that was genius. So I think I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah, the Facebook friend requests do get bizarre. I mean, how do you find running the reading party group? Because you're an admin on that, it must be complicated to try and balance all that and write as well. I know it's.
Yeah, it's good because the reading parties don't take a huge amount of time in terms of admin. It's just sort of, once you've lined up the author, it's quite simple after that, because you've just got the excerpts that you need to do.
Yeah.
But in general, I get quite a lot of weird requests, like especially since becoming an author. Like, I'm constantly being friended by people who have got no idea who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for that. When you say weird requests, what's the most far out country they've come from that you weren't expecting?
I think that the most bizarre messages I get are from people who think that they can sort of just message and say, oh, I've got a really good idea for a book. Can you pitch it to your publisher? And it's like, that's not how it works. And it's like, because I think because people think if they can get in with an author, then they've instantly got an easier way to publication. But unfortunately, that's not how it works, and you do have to just do it the normal way. So yeah, I think those are the most awkward messages I get.
When you were trying to get an agent yourself, because when we met, you hadn't got one. It was a quick turnaround between the agent and then the deal, and it happened pretty fast after I met you, really.
Yeah, I was really lucky actually. I was only querying for 2.5 months, which I think is quite quick to get an agent. So I do consider myself massively lucky with that, and I do think it was sort of right time, right place, and I'd done a lot of research into what agents were looking for. So I think I submitted to the right person. I think that's really important. And then the actual book deal, because Embla, who I'm published with, because they're digital first, so they focus on the ebook and the audiobook, and then they focus on the paperback afterwards. Because of that, it just, everything moves a lot quicker than with a normal publisher.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why it's all happened quite quickly. And then obviously they said they wanted to publish the 2 books in 1 year, so that's then meant that everything's moved very quickly on book 2 as well.
Yeah, I must admit that's what I'm not having to do at the moment, and trying to balance that and do everything. What do you do for downtime when you're not doing all this? Because there can't be a lot left.
I don't really have downtime. I play with my kids.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else to ask. Is there anything else you might want to say?
No, it's just thank you so much for having me. And if you haven't read the book yet, please do, and please leave a review. And yeah, let me know what you think.
Well, I found it really interesting, and the audiobook is a really good version. So if you've not tried that, try the audiobook.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with the audiobook. I was very, very pleased.
Well, thanks everybody. I shall see you next week with Belinda Bauer. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for having me, Alex.
No problem at all. Thank you, and hope your kids have enjoyed it too. I know you've got 2 now.
Yeah, they're in the background. I better go sort them out ready for bed.
No problem. Thank you very much.